What's up, everybody? My name is Rory Flynn. I am the founder of Systematiq AI, and today we're going to go through some cool conversations. I think we're going to, talk about a lot of different things in the world of AI, how that's impacted a lot of businesses, what it means for the agency world. I have a lot of questions. I know Harsh has a lot of answers too, and there's just been a lot of interesting things happening in the space at this point. Really, I don't think a lot of people saw how quickly this would come on. I think we all knew that it was going to be something, but I didn't think most people were sitting here 18 months later being like, this is the number one conversation that everyone's having at this point.
Right.
I mean, I know you've been knee deep in it. I personally have been knee deep in it as well. But like, what does that look like? What did the inflection point? Like, when did that happen? When did it take hold? When did you start to be like, oh, this is something we're dealing with now?
So I think I think the convo's been going on for a while, right?
Yeah.
But then the naysayers have had their voice for a while, and I think the people who are the early adopters have had their challenges for a while in the sense of, can I get access to this stuff? And I think in some instances agencies have not been able to get the access because before you spend the money, you want the lawyers to say yes, right? So there's been a lot of those kind of movements. Now, having said that, if you look at networks around the world, there are different situations, right? Different countries are allowing different things, different clients are allowing different things. Your contracts with your clients are also yes and no on different things. And now suddenly the convo shifted to, well, if you're using AI, what discount can we get, right? While it's actually costing more money.
100%.
Right? Or if not more, it's costing the same money, and maybe it's bringing efficiency, but it's not. But the dream of AI is selling everybody, everything's going to get cheaper, everything's going to be faster. Yes, everything will be faster, but what it's going to do, in my opinion, is going to free up time of your teams to actually bring more value, think more about your client's business, rather than just trying to get to the deadline.
100%.
So actually saying that AI will actually cut short a lot of our time is not a fair statement to make, because I think we shaved out a lot of time over time, to make things more faster. What it's going to do is it's going to allow us to experiment more and do more trial and errors even after you've learned it all. It's more about efficiency of your time rather than a project having tighter timelines. But I think we're still grappling with that concept as an industry, as clients, as individuals. Everybody complained about everyone's a photographer, everyone's a content creator, and then over time, it didn't match up to the same thing, but then we started validating the styles of content everybody shot, right? Like the raw kind of content is more the new way to do it, but the polished way never went away. It's just, it gave its own life. I think we are exponentially growing in how much content we create. It didn't replace the content, right? And I think AI also, the two little words, have so many meanings.
So many.
You ask an art director, AI means something completely different. You ask a filmmaker, it means something different. You ask a writer, it means something different. You ask an ops person, it's completely different, right? But we do a catch-all for, I'm using AI, or so-and-so's using AI, or we can't use AI. But, AI has been around way longer than what we've been buzzing about. It's just that it was never packaged in a way that we all cared about.
It's a really great point about the packaging, right? Because it had been around. You had like your Jarvises or whatever those tools were back in the day that could write for you, but they were never good, right? They never felt intuitive. They never felt like there was like something on the other side there, like talking back to you, right? Which is, I think, probably the biggest. That might be from the explosion of all of this, probably one of the biggest takeaways for me was like when this thing started talking back to me and then started like going off on its own sort of tangents. I was like, this is a little bit weird,
right?
A little bit weird, but also you can see how helpful it would be once it starts to kind of get into when you get into conversation with it,
right?
And really start to build ideas, start to build different perspectives. You said something that I want to hit on, right? And I think this is probably important and probably something that I'm interested in, right? Because you've seen it, right? Like you see it on different mediums, super polished content. Right, like we talk about from a brand side. Like, everyone wants to have a Nike commercial. Everyone wants to have, an Apple commercial or a spot or a still that looks like that super polished, clean look. But then you have people that are winning on, the digital side on like something like a meta ad or whatever, where they're taking a selfie video and it's, they're sweating and they're unshaven and it's just like terrible lighting. and that gets a ton of engagement because it looks raw and authentic. Now, I personally think when on the creative side, right, like everyone is concerned that AI has this look. It has this like look and feel, right? Everyone's like, I know that's AI, right? Yeah, yes, but isn't that at a certain point, like, does the market demand it? Like, if they like it, does it matter what it looks like?
I don't think the consumer gives a shit.
That's what I mean.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we do as creative people. We go, because we also want to play the game of can I recognize AI?
Yeah.
Right? The consumer doesn't care. I mean, there are virtual influencers, right, who are generated through AI. How are they getting the followings if people care this or that? After some point, you are relating those people. Like, in fact, there is quite a bit of research on how when you watch these TV shows and we actually connect to the characters on the show, not to the actual actors. If you meet those actors off screen, the connection's not the same as they are on screen, right? Look at AI influencers. You're kind of creating a connection to that character on screen. Whether they ever have an existence off screen, it doesn't matter. I mean, and some of it I think will depend on what they're covering, what they're talking about. You know, with travel, this is my personal choice. With travel, I probably want a real life influencer, maybe showing me a different world, right? But if I'm talking about, you know, imagination and I'm talking about, you know, getting inspiration for what the next big entertainment thing could be, I don't care. I want to break the imagination barrier, right? So it doesn't matter if you're real or not.
It's a good point. Did you happen to see the new spots that Coke put out that were fully generated and created by AI?
Right.
All right. So at face value, I just want to say, you know, shout out to Dave Clark, one of the guys who worked on them. I know him very well. He's super talented, Hollywood guy. I've been really like an ambassador for using the tools and just being like, as an industry, like, guys, get on this. So that comes out and that sparks like the biggest polar reaction I've seen in a long time. Now, I don't know if you saw the emotional charts of the people that they surveyed.
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay, so they surveyed, you know, the diehard Coke consumers, right? Like no one that's in this AI marketing bubble, no one that's like, you know, talking about and debating, you know, AI on a daily basis. The emotional charts as you go through the entire commercial is just like positive, 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 positive. They have no idea it's AI and they don't care. Like it's
They
like
have no idea
it made
and
them
they
feel
don't care.
something though, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you see this happening. You know now with data like this, right? Can you imagine the conversations that are now happening with the clients who are first off probably like, we're never going to use AI. It's not going to be like that. We can't do it. Now this stuff comes out. Coke blazes the trail.
Right.
As in, you know, in the agency world, is this going to be the topic of conversation now moving forward?
I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, over the years, you know, I'm personally a big fan of animation. You know, before I got into advertising, I studied animation. Okay. So, you know, when teams show me work in animation, I tend to have a soft spot and I have to hold back my emotions and go, okay, is this the best work? But we're talking techniques, right? And, you know, I've had my fair share of challenges in talking to marketers about why animation can actually deliver that emotion. It doesn't have to be live action, right? So if you just take a step back and look at it and going, we've been doing animation for a while.
Yeah.
Right? So why is AI generated stuff not going to deliver on emotion, right? Like, I mean, the new Lion King is going to come out at the end of this year, and it's all photorealistic, right? Sure, no one's saying AI, but it's photorealistic, right? They're not real lions walking around. They're not real animals walking around, right? But when my kids watch the trailer, they're excited to go watch the movie. They don't care. They're not differentiating between, is this animated? Is this real? In fact, in their heads, they're going, it's real. And I'm going, yeah, it's not real. And they argued with me about it. Right? And at some point, we're not going to care. I mean, think about it. Like some of us grew up before digital came about. Yeah. Right? So our brain kind of separated between all our screens of the TV screen versus the mobile screen versus the tablet screen versus all the different screens. But fast forward to today, I'm doing different things on different devices and it's not a disruption. It's just I know my brain just switches depending on which screen I'm glancing at. Right? So similarly, like I think at the moment, the AI conversation I feel is a lot about efficiency or breaking what was not possible or making it cheaper or making it, you know, we're too worried about the technology right now or trying to grasp our heads around it. Because let's be honest, the minute you learn something about it, something new's come up.
100%.
Right? We no longer have that time like we had with a lot of other stuff in the past where we had the time to master our skills. We had the time to come to terms with, now it's a new modern era, let's move to the next stage, right? Before you've even signed up to your trial of this new thing that just came out, before you could even take your credit card out and pay for the monthly, a new tool has already come out. Or you've spoken to someone else and they go, yeah, don't use that tool, use this other one, right? And how many things are you going to sign up to at any given time, right? So while our experiences are very diverse, our tools haven't been that diverse, right? Like you talk to any art director around the world, they're probably licensed to the same tools, right? Now AI is actually allowing us potentially to have that difference. You know, I had one of my mentors when I was junior, he would talk to me about all the photographers he had. And I jokingly once said, can you share your bookmark list with me? And he goes, no way. That's what's going to make you different from me. You figure out your own photographers. You should be taking notes every time I'm mentioning a photographer to you. Like, this is my years of how I'm going to get my comps better. And he's a mentor, right? So it's not like he was trying to be, he taught me the importance of not just being curious and finding new things, but then banking it.
Interesting.
Right? So over time, our exposure to these tools will become a level playing field, but how much you've experimented with these tools, or how much can you go, the combination of these tools will become like your photographer's bookmark, if you will. You know?
I think it's like and again, it comes back to this conversation, we go into the creatives piece of it, right? It always, my opinion has always been that creatives are probably the most underappreciated and under sort of utilized, in a sense, aspects of any business. To me, that's my flat out opinion. I think visual plays such a visceral role in everything, and whether that's someone who's designing or coming up with ideas. Like, the one thing that I've always found with the tools and why they're so good is they require curiosity. And I mean, if you want to me, I always make the correlation between creatives and curiosity also. It's like you can't think in the box. Thinking in the box is just like for a data analyst. For a creative, you have to go your own direction, you have to blaze your own trail. So I feel like these tools are perfectly set up for the people that oftentimes, in me working online and doing a lot of content, who are so viscerally against it. I'm like, do you realize this has also just been a gift placed upon you? Like, I think something is like even for a creative outlet, for testing different concepts, for just general, I think, like mental well-being maybe, like is a weird thing to say.
Right.
I use it as an outlet every once in a while. I just want to go create. Like when I used to think about doing that with Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever, I might work on something all night or 2 days, whatever. Cool, just make it for myself. Now I can explore 30 angles, and maybe my creative ADD is not good with that.
Right. I mean, I think what's interesting in this is, as you were talking, this thought sparked to me is, listen, everyone wants to be creative. Everyone says they are creative, and I think there are times when we now as creative people are kind of expected to say, yeah, an idea can come from anywhere. Sure, an idea can come from anywhere, but I think especially in advertising creatives, the one quality that makes good creatives is also withstanding the blowbacks you get from your ideas.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, I think creative people go through a lot of rejection through their entire career. Even the best ones probably have gone through the most rejection, right? But it wasn't about them being able to handle the rejection. It's more about how they didn't let it impact their future thinking. There is a whole schooling system that we all grow up in before we decide to become creative people that kind of tells us the rules of society, right? And creativity really kicks in is when you go up against something, right? But that process of going up against something is scary as hell for everyone who wants to follow the process, right? And I think that tension, it's only going to become more prominent because now, once at a point where we all have mastered these tools, and now just prompting is going to get us to the results, my technical skills in the design softwares and everything is not the thing that's separating me. It's going to be how much of my lived experiences can I apply back into this? How much of my downfalls in life can I apply back into this and turn that into a commercial savvy idea? Like everyone, I have my friend who works in Bollywood and he's always getting hit up by all the friends. I have a movie idea for you. And he's like, sure, write a plot and write the pilot and come to me. And he goes, most people don't even come back, right? Because everyone just gets glitzy and glamorous about this. Like, we get this, when you're out somewhere and the minute my non-advertising friends hear, they go, oh, which brands do you work for? And you tell them the brand, I go, let me tell you, I have an idea for this. I'm like, okay, that's not really an idea, but sure, can you come back with 10 more and
Yeah.
you'll never hear from them again about that, right? So, I think some of that comes from, just being able to keep going. That AI is not going to change that,
No.
right? What I think is going to be interesting is as new talent comes into the industry, how do they keep learning this pressure of hearing a no or pushing the boundaries, and you're going to keep hearing a no, and the art of convincing is still going to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
Everyone always says, how many ideas do we come up with as a creative person, and how many actually get made? If an unproduced, unrun idea could give people confidence in their gut, more ideas would be bought, we would be going through less rounds of creativity, right? Or you could just be doing safe work, and something that doesn't shake my, principles or my expectations of what the agency would be coming back with, or, I'll just approve it. But there's always that tension of, will it work? And a creative's instinct or a planner's instinct saying, this is what's going to resonate. Mm-hmm. And if it resonates, it will work. Going back to your classic example of the Coke ad, right?
Yeah.
Sure, within the industry, we had this debate, yes, no, and probably it questioned everyone who went through the approval process on going, should I be approving this, right? Because we also live in a society where you make one big mistake and you're out, right? You could do 20 great things, but that one big mistake is what everybody will point at, right? So our risk-taking abilities are always getting challenged, and there are some people who will take the risks, and there are some people who won't, until it all becomes, it's all standard, and everyone's, I was in the early game of jumping in.
It's good. It's such a, I never expected it to be this polar. Right. Honestly, when I first got onto it, I was so blinded by the light. Mm-hmm. I was like, how could anyone who's in a creative field be like, this is going to be the end of it all? And I'm like, I have my hands on this unlimited creativity. I can do whatever I want at any time of day, no holds barred, let's go anywhere in any direction. I feel like to some people that might be too much, but me, I'm just like, that's a never-ending rabbit hole that I would love to swan dive right into.
I also think, you might need to cut this out, but I also think we live in a world today where your opinions are always questioned, right? Yep. Whether it be, is climate change real or not? Is the political climate my side or the other side? Or you can't really talk about it without disrupting your relationships.
Totally.
AI is a safe place to debate.
Yes.
Right? Does this look real? Does it not look real? Right? So we're taking out everything onto that.
Yeah.
Right? Because anything else, and you just lost a friend, you just lost a family member in being able to talk to them again. So maybe, I don't know, this is just my hypothesis, but
has been pretty civil. Has been pretty civil. Haven't lost, don't have any estranged family members at this point from AI. Maybe not yet. We'll see where it goes. But no, it's cool, man, because we come from different worlds, right?
Yeah.
I come from more of this digital high-paced background where volume is king versus quality, and maybe ideas are king, where I think, our whole focus is really we need to put out as much volume as possible to test, optimize, iterate. So, that's one use case for it. But I was really interested when we first met about just kind of how it works intricately within inside an agency, because I think that's where, obviously we all know client relationships, right?
Yeah.
They are what they are. Everyone's different, but a lot of them are the same. And intricately working in a team and smaller units as a bigger whole, that's where I think this stuff is most useful. And a lot of times, personally, I think communication is the place where it can help the most. I don't know if it gets talked about enough in terms of just whether that's internally communicating, externally communicating. You have ideas, it's hard enough to get that down on a piece of paper and say it in 3 sentences. When you can express it visually or with motion or a fully fleshed out idea so that you can, creative can send it to their creative director, however that works. How did you see that start to evolve within? Did it happen organically, or did you guys kind of we have to start doing this? How did that look?
No, I think you'll always have creatives on your team who'll just go do it. They'll go buy their own little license. They shouldn't have to do that, but they'll do it, or they'll be dabbling with stuff and. And sometimes you'll be like, don't tell me about it. I just want to judge for what you're showing me. But I worked in Australia before where we used to show something called scams, which is just hand drawings. And I'm not that old, so it's not like it was before we had all the other softwares to do it. It's more about using your time more efficiently. A poor creative team could be working all night trying to get this one perfect comp. and all it takes is for the CCO to turn around the next day and say, yeah, I don't like the idea, that whole comp's gone, right? And I also have another theory when you show it with clients. If there are clients who are open to it, right, with hand-ons, you've now, and what I mean by hand-ons, I don't mean like storyboard level illustrations and all that stuff. I'm more just saying drawn good enough to get the idea. You also take out some of the subjectivity of the casting of that stock image that you used, or the clothes that person is wearing, or the location you put them in. You're actually trying to get the client to focus on the idea, right? Now, fast forward to use of AI, everything can be done much faster and more fully polished and finished. But then, and this I don't know, I mean, maybe time will tell us, are we trying to sell something so perfect that there is no room for progressing it further creatively, right? Or are we painting such a tight picture that you are selling what you're selling, and that's what the expectation becomes to make? And what I mean by that is, when you present a film script, right? You present it, you have some keyframes, et cetera. Once the client absolutely loves it, you get into director treatments, and 3 different directors will probably come to you with treatments. Now, if I have already sold in something so definitive in look and feel and what I wanted, how much collaboration are you going to be able to have with the director to add their own thing into it as well, and you not getting precious as a creative going, but this is what I sold, why are you adding this layer in, right? And I've often seen collaborating with great directors, the film gets even better and better. And sometimes you get to experiment things that you didn't know. And the benefit of that is, I'm a partner to a client, which means there are times when I know how far to push it, right? Because over time you learn from each other, and when a director comes in, a production house comes in just for that project, and they might have ideas. There are times when we guide them, going, yeah, maybe you're going too far. But there'll be times when they've said something which you haven't paid attention to, because you're deep into the account, or you're so deep into the ways of working that you've gone, I know this is what will work, right? But that's where you're going to get this external thing. So when you start presenting highly finished, high fidelity stuff, maybe it won't change anything, maybe it won't matter, or maybe we are kind of reducing the experimentation after the work is sold.
I really like that point. I've never heard that perspective before. Now, here's a question. This is me being dumb, not understanding how majority of the industry works in some way, shapes, or form when it comes to this. So, you sell this into the client buys the idea, you guys then go look for, let's just say, production company, director XYZ to go actually execute. Now,
no. Even before execute, they will write you a treatment.
Okay.
They will say, okay, I took in the script, but this is how I envision that script coming to life, right? And usually the bidding process is done so that you're trying to bring in apples for apples kind of costs, because you want to make sure that you're feeling like you're doing this at the right price point, and the procurement people are happy on all sides of the agency, the client, et cetera. It's a fair bid, if you will.
Okay.
But that's more of how a producer and the account team would think, and a client would think. As a creative, I'm like, there are 3 ways to bring this to life. The triple bid would actually show me which director is showing their passion and bringing what they love into this. Because sometimes, it's a creative process. There's no guarantee just because I loved your work and your reel that you're going to absolutely nail this film that I've given you to take, right? We've seen in bid processes where we will pitch it out to 3 directors, and the director we think we absolutely want, the treatment doesn't deliver on it.
Got it.
Right? So you get that experimentation. Then once you award that, then we go and make the film, right? And also, listen, sometimes you might write this blue sky vision, and then your producer will come in and go, okay, now let's look at what that means for numbers, because there is budgets, right? Now, I think when you start mixing a director's vision, a creative's vision, the client's vision, and fuel it with AI as well, certain things that were not possible before because of budgets might now suddenly be possible. There are many things that happen. Now, there are also instances in which some of the laws haven't yet kicked in, or people haven't thought about it, right? So we will still go through some risk takers who will push the boundaries of what things are in place for some of the other ancillary industries. And we might end up disrupting that, knowingly or unknowingly, right? We might end up disrupting how we all work, but at some point there will be either there needs to be guardrails put around it, or this is the new way of working, let's keep going.
Interesting. So the directors, I mean, really that's when it comes down to it. They have to put their vision on it for you guys to give basically the stamp of approval, cross-check that with all the other things that go on the client checklist, right? With the producers, everything. Now, here's where I'm thinking this could potentially be going is if the director, like as a whole changes, right? Like where directing, a lot of times you can look at a film or you can look at a piece of work and say, that's X, right? A lot of times, like I feel like particular artists, they have a very defined style and they keep they keep hammering on that style. As this evolves now, you're going to see people that can, span the gamut because they've been able to test and access, let's call it different styles and see what they actually like versus hammering in.
But your taste will still be your taste.
Correct.
Right? So you may have a style, but that style came because of years of you building your own taste.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an art director and I have a certain style, but that doesn't mean the person next to me has the same style. And not one is right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's just their taste palette got them to that. And again, it comes back to that photographer analogy I gave you, right? It's the accumulation of all the things we do. I'll often tell creatives, we'll often have this debate about why the end product doesn't end up looking good. I was like, the way you change people's taste is you just keep putting high quality comps and everything in front of whoever you're showing stuff to. Over time, when you start showing low quality stuff, people are not going to like it. You're going to get them out of bad taste into good taste. It's our job to help people elevate their taste. If you look at it, take Instagram for example.
Yeah.
You look at people's feed, it's highly curated.
Very.
But then you look at their Instagram reels, it's nowhere near the effort they put into their feed. Why is that? Because the reel disappears in 24 hours unless you pin it. But the feed is there for you. So, you post something today, I'll see it, it's gone tomorrow. But on your feed, when I come back to your handle, it's all there. So, but just look at how people have evolved having a dynamic style between how reels are used versus how feed is used, or how a TikTok is used versus how a Facebook was being used, right? So I think in a similar way, as an artist, you want to have dynamic styles.
Yeah.
You don't want to have, I know there are times when you'll say, I've heard creatives say this, like make this more Wes Anderson-y.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
That's the person I was thinking of, like in terms of,
But when you do that,
define style.
And that's fine too, but Wes Anderson curated his own style, and we as people define that as a Wes Anderson style.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
There are other people who have tried to emulate him, but because he defined and established a style, everyone else is second.
Yeah. Which is where, when I get sort of, I don't want to say jaded, but I think I've been through enough examples in my own creative career where getting something done trumps like the artistic sort of exploration, if that makes sense. So like, I'm curious if you see any of this or have any sort of opinion on it, because I think, at a certain point when, the volume, because we've seen it grow, right? It was like newspapers and magazines, then it was you add television, then you add the phone, then you add, the computer, then you add the phone. Medium, like we're going to 100 different mediums with all this different content, right? So like when these mediums start to continually expand and we have to always do it in different formats for different audiences on every different channel of social media, whatever it might be, like, do you think skewing, like from a client perspective, they're going to want to skew towards who can just execute and do this at volume versus who can like artistically sort of elevate this in a sense? Like, do you think that becomes more of a focus on a client side, on an agency side, versus like, we really want to make this visually or like super, emotionally, viscerally impactful? If does that question make sense though?
It does.
Yeah.
On one side you're talking about efficiency, on the other side you're talking about value.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
I think all our multiple screens are attacking us every single second of the day, right?
Visual assault.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to look at it is, sure, you've got all the media buy in the world, and I will corner you from different places, but at some point, how are you going to break my monotony and make me remember you?
Yeah.
Right? That's what it comes down to. So, right now, I think a lot of the convo just comes down to efficiency and, creating high volume at speed. But okay, once everybody achieves that, once every single brand's got the same tools in place, everybody's exploding at scale and hitting every single screen possible, every single surface possible, okay, now how are you going to differentiate?
Because what comes to mind is someone, I mean, look, my knowledge on some of these brands and what they've done intricately is very limited. I follow brands, whatnot, things of that nature. I always thought Geico was an interesting strategy from like a just a purely like, let's put as many tentacles in the market as we can with as much creative as we can and as many places as we can. And just like at a certain point, it overwhelms, right? And like you think insurance, you think Geico. That's me personally, because I've just seen it so many times. But like, I see that strategy starting to be employed. It became more relevant in my side of the business, right? And the social media side, the paid media, paid organic side of things. Do you see that becoming more sort of integrated into more campaign work from an agency perspective or big,
It always should be.
Yeah, I mean, from a volume standpoint, though, has that ever been possible, really, to create that with a...
It's plausible. I wouldn't say it's possible, it's plausible.
Okay.
I say that because there will be certain things that you will scale. I mean, me and my teams have done campaigns that have allowed for that. Like, you might have a core idea, but then it just needs scale because you're using a lot of other talent to deliver the same way, but with a little spin of their own, right? And so, I mean, I think it really comes down to if you evaluate creative properly, the creative work, and then how do you scale it? Listen, there are times when as agencies, we also get pushed into a situation of, okay, you need different versions, I'll just give you versions, But do you need versions or do you need a version of a piece of work that's right in the context where you're going to put it? Now, it's very easy for me to say that. That also comes with a massive dollar bill to it, right? Because if you're going to create purely unique content for each channel, in some instances, it's not sustainable either. So there is a little bit of a, you got to play the game and evaluate where you go, just blast it out and do versioning, and where do you go, okay, but let's hold back some of these channels where we stay true to the core idea, but we're going to do something that's right for the platform. I mean, think about your own Instagram behavior. People are always DMing, sharing content.
Yes.
When did you share anything that was blasted at you 5 different ways?
Nowhere, yeah. That makes sense, yeah.
Because that's also kind of going, okay, you're advertising to me. And, listen, I'm very passionate about our industry and advertising, but also I'm aware bad work means there's a lot of people out there who go, oh, these ads are so annoying. And that, always I'm like, sure, yeah, that's what they see a lot of times, but how do we as an industry of marketers and advertisers elevate that so that we're not just doing a talk like this where we're talking about we've got to entertain, how can we actually entertain outside of a 30-second spot? Every surface today is trying to entertain me. How can advertising entertain in that so that the love for your brand only keeps increasing? At the end of the day, it's you being memorable for me.
Yeah.
And me wanting to come back later going, I want to think about that brand. You've got to stand out, right? I mean, these are basics of advertising. I'm not saying anything new. I'm just putting it into the context of, mass versioning.
I think, I noticed it, right? Like, I noticed the mass versioning, if you want to call it that, from when it was just Instagram, right? It was like just Instagram. Well, then there's Snapchat, and then there's Instagram stories, and there's Instagram Reels, and there's TikTok, then there's YouTube, then there's YouTube Shorts, right? Like it just keeps going. And it just feels like, it used to be we used to create content for one channel. Now we create content for 17 channels, and it has to be in different formats, and it has a different audience, I
mean, I was just wondering, yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were joking about, will there be a point where I have to start partnering with a chief versioning officer?
I mean, I don't, that's why I'm asking, because I think it's plausible, right? Like it's just, you see it so differently.
Right.
The power of YouTube, right? Like I think that one to me is still, I keep seeing it every day. I see it as a marketer with a marketing background, me being on YouTube, I see the back end there and what those data and analytics look like, and I'm salivating.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God, I never had access to this like any tool.
You bring a good point as a last thing to wrap. Like, YouTube is a really interesting example, right? Treat YouTube as a destination you want to get to, right? Now, you end up going there because your interest was piqued enough in other places to come and actually watch the full 10-minute video or whatever, right? But just like movie trailers, it's the 5-second, 6-second, 10-second trailers where you were teased in different channels that eventually got you there, right? So while they were cut downs or choreographed scenes of whatever that long form is got you interested. It wasn't just, let me just do 50 different sizes of this whatever's on YouTube and put it out there. Now YouTube forces us to think like that because it's motion, it's film, it's, and once you're there, you're there. But for me to get there, or you to get me into a theater, it's the trailers that do that, So almost think of you rather than using the word versioning, because I think sometimes we've probably tainted the word versioning, if you will, even just the way some of the things we've talked about here, right? Give me a trailer, right? Some of the channels, my attention span is not going to be there. I can get distracted very easily on some other platforms for the right reasons or for the reasons the platform was designed for. So use that to your advantage. So when you are versioning, if you will, like trailer it in a way that I want to now double click and go further in rather than just scroll past.
It's very interesting because you see the growth of it, you see the vastness of it, and you see the data that's back behind it. So it's very, like, to me, the marketing piece of this too, which is interesting, is data, right? Like I've seen this grow since we, the organic side, we're really always looking at data, like how can we like shift and like sort of make assessments based on this, right? AI has come in and totally helped that. When it's like, how do I sift through all of this to like come out with an idea?
Right.
And I think it's really been a crazy like boost in terms of like, oh, now I know exactly kind of what works. Where do I go with that? How do I iterate on that?
And I think there's a good, there's always been a tension between creative people and data people.
Yeah.
And I think the tension is because we speak two different languages.
100%.
The day you can partner with the data person and a data person can humanize and interpret that data in a way that a creative wants to listen, and a creative can explain their ideas in a way a data person can go, wait, this is how we will reframe it because of the data I've seen. That partnership can actually completely change even how you use any of the AI tools. Because I think when you start mixing those two things, you're going to start evolving and changing context again.
So tell me, this is where now I'm interested, right? Like when it comes to this stuff, because I think everyone has a different way of going about getting to basically the same end result, right? Or like their own sort of end result. When something like this comes in through the agency, right? Like maybe there's, you guys are synthesizing numbers, or you get feedback on a focus group, something like that. Like how does that information get filtered through because I'm trying to think about it in my world, I don't have any of that.
Right.
I'm like purely guessing. So when you guys have something like that, how does that look? Like where does that go? How does that infiltrate?
So you'll usually partner with the planning, the strategists on your team. And some of the geeky stuff, they'll make it more digestible for us. The more senior creative you become, the more you start getting involved in those convos as well. Sometimes you'll also have creatives actually sit in on the focus groups. Because sometimes the reactions can spark something different for a creative than it for a strategist, right? And then it's more about, saying, where do we take a step back? Where do we make some changes? Or where do we just listen to our instinct and actually recommend to the client, we don't think we should entertain this that was said in the focus group. But I think you have to be real to yourself as a creative, as a planner, as an agency, and as a client as well, to have that trust and understanding to go, the focus group, if you will, was just a test of a sample of people, but you also have a whole group of people in the agency side and yourself as a client who's had years of instinct and gut and in building great campaigns for their brands, to actually go, we know what it could be, we could make it better, we could ignore it, we could choose this. So, and I think different creative people, different strategists take that information differently depending on, what cultures they grew up through, whether it be the agency culture, whether it be they've had change of jobs, whether they are better listeners or not better listeners. I think those things come into play as well. But usually you will have a planner who will work with you on some of this stuff. And sometimes you'll have a planner who will actually say, actually, I have different data that contradicts some things we heard. Let me go talk to the client about it as well.
Interesting. So this is where now, this is when I get super interested, right? Because somehow I ended up being an operations guy. Don't even know how that works. Right. AI, you forced me there. So now I just get really interested in teams, right? Because always like, if you're a builder of teams, if you like your employees, you don't want them to hate their work. You want them to like their work, right? Yeah. So that was always my goal in integrating this stuff was, how do we make their lives easier? How do we make their lives a little bit more, I don't want to say enriched, but like, how do we give them extra time to kind of focus on what they want to focus on, right? Instead of just like, get this done, please get this done, instead of it being more like, explore, Like, please explore, because that exploration to me will lead to better sort of outcome.
Right.
Now, when we're looking at two different sides of the coin here, mine, like I said, I'm a little bit more volume. You guys are tossing around really big ideas, really big, really big clients.
Yeah.
What does that process look like in terms of like client brief comes in? Who does it go to? How does that information get filtered? And how does like an idea pop up? Like typically, I don't know this, so I'm curious how this looks.
Yeah, I mean the client team. Once the client's written an input brief, it goes to the account service team or client services. Different agencies call that same group something different. Someone who liaisons with the client and manages the relationship, etc. It then comes into the strategy team, who will work with the data and analytics team and their own tools and everything to actually write a creative brief in partnership with the ECD or the CCO or the creative director, depending on the size of the brief. And then it gets briefed into 2 to 3 teams. You put in 2 to 3 teams because one team might not nail it on that day.
Okay.
Or, you get to see different ideas. I think then it really comes down to how those ideas get reviewed. And that's where there are different types of creative directors and plus everywhere. There are some who are decisive, there are some who are not decisive, there are some who know their categories so well that they know what to say yes to and what not to say yes to. And there are some who will actually give you the freedom to go, I'm going to take one crazy idea with the 3 ideas I take. You zero it down to the 3 ideas. You work with your planning team to make sure it's all on strategy, it's all hitting the objectives the client had originally outlined in the client brief. And then you go pitch the idea. I make it sound way easier.
I was going to say, it's a lot of touch points.
Because you could go through rounds and rounds.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, assuming you're going through one round, that's how it would be. You could go through rounds and rounds internally with the client. Sometimes it depends on time. But I often say, if the leaders of the project work with decisiveness and with confidence and actually work right with the client in partnership, you can get to great work much faster than second guessing yourself.
So how much influence would you say a client, like maybe your point of contact at the client you're working with, how much influence do they have in a lot of what you're doing in terms of like what I'm questioning? Maybe this isn't an appropriate question, but I've always noticed when I was working with certain clients, we knew what would work for the person that was on the other end of the line that would get the idea pushed further, right? So is that take hold in the sort of the creative process in terms of like we know we have to get it through this team to actually get this bought in, and like these are what these people like.
There is a lot of that influence, and you also have to think smart about how you sell that idea in, because I don't think clients don't want to buy good work. I just think we have to do a good job of packaging it so that it doesn't sound outlandish. Because remember, on the creative side, the crazier the idea is, the more excited it gets us. But you have to then package it in partnership with your planner or your strategist, etc. to how do you sell this idea, and that doesn't make it any less lethal for your brand to sell further. But at the same time, it's also not, whoa, this is really risky. I don't know if I can sign off on this. So yeah, of course, it totally plays the dynamics. But if you're on strategy, if you're on brief, often the scariest ideas may not sound as scary. Then it's more about how are you selling this to your client.
So we're
giving them the confidence to buy it.
Harsh, man, that was awesome. I really appreciate you answering just some of my really dumb, naive questions. Because
They're not dumb. It's just different ways of working.
It's cool. It's cool because it's two different sides. I don't really get to see it that much. We're so, I feel like myopic most of the time in terms of like what industry we've been in. So no, it's good to hear it from the other side. Definitely changed my perspective on a few things. That whole piece about selling the idea and not just like the actual like end piece and being able to like not taint the idea. I really like that. I think that's a lasting message that I'm gonna take, and I'm definitely gonna put that into my process, because that one, I don't know, something about it just like hit me in my soul where I'm like, oh damn, that's really good. That feels right. Like, don't taint the idea. So thank you again for answering those questions and just letting me rip with you.
No, pleasure. This was fun, and I think we got to start speaking more of the same language so we can, cause trouble between ops and creativity. I think that's really what it comes down to, is more and more AI that comes in. Speak the same language.
I love it. It goes back to the whole thing, communication, right? Like once it happens, it's going to be good. Once people realize that could be the main driver, I think we got it. I think we nailed it. So
Great.
That's good to see you, man.
Awesome. Good to see you.
Good talking.
Yeah.